Good morning and welcome to this webcast. Thank you for joining us for this STEMnet webcast, Making in the CSU, Makerspaces, Fab Labs, and Innovation Centers. I'm your host, Jennifer Wicks, coming to you from behind the scenes from Learning and Development. Happy to support our STEMnet team at the Office of the Chancellor in presenting this series of webcasts ongoing year after year. And we look forward to your engagement throughout the session. Please do enter questions in the chat, comments for our presenters, and do let us know which campus you're joining from this morning across the system. We'll have a lot of links that we're going to be pasting into the chat for you as well, and look forward to all of these presentations. There will be 2-minute Q&A after each presenter speaks today, so we look forward to your engagement. And with that, I'd like to introduce Executive Director of STEMnet, Dr. Frank A. Gomez. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Gomez.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the kind introduction as always, and a warm welcome to all of you out there. I hope you and your families are all healthy and safe. It is great you can join us today for a webcast entitled Making in the CSU, Makerspaces, Fab Labs, and Innovation Centers. This marks STEMnet's 24th webcast to the CSU community. Makerspaces, hackerspaces, Fab Labs, whatever you call them, are amazing. And wherever they may be found, schools, libraries, science or engineering departments, or private facilities, they provide a do-it-yourself DIY space for collaborative work for kids, students, adults, and entrepreneurs. Some of these spaces may contain 3D printers, laser cutters, soldering irons, and sewing machines, but a makerspace does not need to include all of these machines or even any of them to be considered a makerspace. For materials, as few as cardboard, Legos, and art supplies may be enough to consider yourself in business. The core of a makerspace is the maker mindset of creating something out of nothing and exploring one's own interest. These spaces also help to prepare our future STEM leaders who need the critical 21st century skills to be successful and enter the workforce. They provide hands-on learning, help with critical thinking skills, and boost self-confidence. Some of the skills that are learned in a makerspace pertain to electronics, 3D printing, and 3D modeling, coding, robotics, and woodworking. Makerspaces all foster entrepreneurship and are being utilized as incubators and accelerators for business startups. Today, we have a great group of presenters to speak on their facilities across the CSU. Before we begin, I want to remind the audience to use the open chat box on their screens to type in their questions. Our speakers, when not presenting, will make every effort to respond in real time. So let's begin. It is with great pleasure for me to announce our first speaker, Dr. Siyahhan, Associate Professor, Educational Technology and Learning Science, and Associate Director of the Center for Research and Engagement in STEM Education, CRESE, at CSU San Marcos. Sinem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining this webinar. Since joining CSUSM in fall 2014, I have been overseeing one of the 3 prerequisite courses that all undergrad students take to enter the teacher credential program. And today I will share with you how my colleagues and I transformed this course from a traditional EdTech course to a maker-based STEM education course with service learning over a 4-year period to build a sustainable maker ecology within the North County, San Diego region. We designed the course to provide early maker-based STEM experiences to K-8 students from diverse backgrounds and to increase teacher candidates and STEM majors' pedagogical and technology knowledge in STEM teaching and learning. As part of the course instructors, teacher candidates, STEM undergrads, and K-8 students come together around maker-based STEM teaching and learning. So as part of the course, like I said, the instructor, the teacher candidates, and STEM undergrads and K-8 students come together around maker-based STEM teaching and learning. Teacher candidates and STEM undergrads learn maker-based STEM activities in class with the instructor, and then implement these activities at school site with kids. And they do this for about 6 to 8 weeks each semester. And together, we form a community of practice and engage, learn, and improve maker-based STEM teaching and learning. So what we do in the course is we introduce our undergrad students to maker pedagogy and design thinking. And then we introduce activities which we frame as design challenges, where our students and later kids work on real world problems. So the activities introduce a real world problem, and then our students and K-8 students use a variety of technologies, low and high tech, to come up with solutions to these problems. So we utilize a circuitry, our Arduino, we do 3D modeling, we do robots, we do coding, and some other technology tools. All right, so we started in fall 2017 with one of the sections of the course. We usually offer 3-4 sections of the course, but we piloted our model with one section of the course, and also with 6 schools. So we successfully implemented the after-school program at school site, and we were able to sort of prepare our undergrads to do the activities with the kids. We partner with Oceanside Unified School District, who serve diverse student populations, mostly low-income and Latino students. In year 2, we expanded our program to include more upper elementary elementary levels. So we expanded our program from serving middle schools to serving grades 4 through 8. And then year 3, we basically implemented our model across all sections of our course, and all our teacher candidates went to school sites and worked around 19 to 24 school sites to run a Makerspace STEM after-school program. Now, in the spring of 2020, the pandemic started, and we had to shift gears and, like everybody else, move things online. So starting fall 22 and spring 2021, we moved after school programming as well as teaching the course online completely. However, our numbers haven't dropped as much. We were able to quickly adapt to the new world of teaching and learning during the pandemic times, and we were able to also join forces with Ed Price, who is the director of Cressy, and also is the PI of a mobile making grant from NSF. He was running a mobile making program with STEM majors who he would hire to run activities with the kids. So we joined forces where we paired teacher candidates who are taking the course with STEM majors that we hired. That created a really nice synergy between the two different groups of undergrad students. And they worked together with the kids online, doing activities via Zoom. During the four-year period, we collected multiple data sources as we were teaching undergrads in our classes, as well as collecting data with the kids and undergrads at school sites. So before COVID, some of the things we did is we collected pre-post service questionnaires from undergrads to understand their sort of interest, their self-efficacy around teaching maker-based STEM. And also, we ask undergrads to take field notes at the age of each session they did with the kids. Also, undergrads, as part of their learning, they generated design artifacts, so we also analyzed those. On the kids side, K-12 side, we tracked their attendance to our sessions. We also did pre-post questionnaires with them to measure their learning, their engagement, also their interest and self-efficacy in making in STEM. And also we collected samples of their products. So whether the products include things that are tangible, that utilize cardboard, circuitry, whatnot. So we took pictures of those. Or sometimes they will be doing coding samples of their products. So whether the products include things that are tangible, that utilize cardboard, circuitry, whatnot. So we took pictures of those. Or sometimes they will be doing coding with Scratch, and we would document their project, their digital products. After COVID, when we moved fully online, both, like I said, like the class and the after school programming, we did have to pivot a bit when it comes to data collection, because as you can imagine, doing a pre-post test online is really hard, and getting kids' attention is hard. And also, the data collection didn't seem as organic as it was when we were doing the after-school programming face-to-face. So we pivoted a bit. We dropped our sort of surveys, more focused on incorporating a focus group during the session and asking questions to kids to capture their learning. We did document the Zoom sessions, so that was very helpful to understand what was going on, what was the process of their engagement in making in STEM. And also with undergrads, we also changed a bit in terms of how we collected data. So we have a large data corpus, so I won't be able to get into everything due to time constraints today, but I would like to highlight a couple of findings. Before the pandemic, on average, we've seen among K-12 students an increase in their interest and confidence in science, technology, and engineering. We did ask them about their interest in math, but we didn't actually see much of a change as part of their participation in our after-school program. But we did see an impact on technology and science mostly. And more than half of the students who participated reported that they do want to come back to our after-school program and continue to taking again. And the attendance data shows that we do have students who participated in the after-school program in the fall. Many of them participated in the spring as well. We also ask K-12 students to sort of rate our undergrads in terms of their ability to sort of communicate ideas and engaging K-12 students. So kids reported that, our undergrads were well prepared. They explained activities really well and helped students when they ran into problems. And overall, it was a pleasant experience to have undergrads as facilitators of the maker-based STEM activities. On the sort of undergrad side, like I said, our undergrads documented their observations and their impressions or interpretations of what was going on during each session. Within 48 hours of the session by writing a field note. So we train them on it a little bit. They do take on this sort of teacher, facilitator, researcher role. But we do ask them a couple of questions. We frame the field notes a bit for them. And then some of the themes that emerge from these field notes is one of the challenges that undergrads have in facilitating maker-based activities was time management, sort of figuring out, how long does it take to do the activity, how they should be breaking down. They also had questions and challenges with student engagement. So they were kind of wondering how to engage students who may not seem interested in the activity, and what are some strategies they can do. Overall, we've seen their sort of self-report of their growth as a facilitator and their interest in making and STEM sort of evolved over the sessions. So when they did their first field notes entry after the first session, looked very different than what they entered on their field notes, at the end of the last session. So we've seen some self-reflection and some report of sort of growing confidence in incorporating making. And also their views of teaching. So many of undergrads have this idea of teaching is sort of telling/explaining. Because of the design thinking framework and the focus on making, it really sort of nudged undergrads to think teaching a little differently, more sort of thinking as a problem solving and more about facilitation than telling. We do sort of a holistic whole group reflection with the undergrads. It's more like a focus group to ask them sort of like what words come to your mind, that captured your experience. And this is a screenshot of the whiteboard in the classroom. Again, this is before the pandemic. They mentioned about adaptability, collaboration, the experience being challenging but rewarding for them. And it's also eye-opening in the sense that they do see STEM and STEAM and making across curricular rather than seeing as a domain that they need to be mastered. They also talk about communication. So our undergrads work in groups of 3 to 5 at a given school site, whether they're running the activities in person or online. So that was really important. They learned teamwork and communication and a sense of growth over time. So these are some of the skills that we would like to see our teacher candidates to develop. So it was good to have them tell us sort of what are some of the things that they learned through this experience. Like I said, with the pandemic, we moved things online. This is a screen capture of how sort of our sessions went. We did pivot and changed our activities a little bit. It was fun but challenging. So there's a sort of a list of things that we learned by this experience. One is it was great to connect with kids sort of online and continue that connection. However, it was hard to sort of predict the attendance of kids, because before in person we had a capture audience. We worked with other after school program providers at school sites, and now we had to sort of capture kids' attention sort of one-on-one. So attendance was a bit unpredictable. But on the other hand, we didn't have to prepare that much sort of materials to bring it to school. So that really saved us time in terms of management. Undergrads really struggled with teamwork and sort of feeling a sense of collaboration because they were kind of collaborating online. And then, collaborating with the kids online. So that was some of the challenges that we experience. Next steps, we really would like to expand the model across CSU campuses. And now that we learn how to do, this after school programming and the course in person, online, and in hybrid modes, we really would like to utilize this online sort of medium to reach rural communities that we don't usually serve in person. Also, we like to do a combination of low and high-tech programming. I think it just, creates a variety, but also, reduces the cost and allows everybody to participate in the program. And also we found a synergy in bringing STEM majors and teacher candidates together. So moving forward, our sort of model and our engagement and our community of practice, like I said in the beginning, involves all these students. To kind of summarize, what we're trying to do is really have a dual impact, if you will. So one path is we would like, we're hoping to increase teacher candidates' self-efficacy and interest in making and STEM sort of direct in that, them. And then when they become teachers, they then be inspired to do more making and STEM in the classroom, whether they're teaching English or STEM content areas. But we're also directly impacting the kids. So we're trying to bring making and STEM experiences directly to the kids. And we're hoping that them, engage in these activities that might inspire them to pursue more making in STEM at school and other parts of their lives. So together, we're hoping to broaden participation of all learners in making and STEM. Thank you so much. That's my presentation, and I'd love to hear any questions you have.
All right. Thank you, Sinem. I know that Frank is coming on. We're having a little bit of connection issues this morning. So in the meantime, we can just dive right into a couple questions. Can you talk more about the design challenges?
Okay, so design challenges, so the impetus behind sort of framing activities as design challenges is we want to make the activities personally and socially relevant to kids to sort of sort of welcome them to the activity. So we frame them as a real world problem. One of the examples is, for example, when you have a cold drink, you put it on a table and it creates a sort of the water ring. So we say, this is a problem, right? So can you think of how to use a robot to clean this? And other examples, we talk about, we're in North County, San Diego. So we talk about, for example, pollution in the ocean. So we pose a question about real world problem around pollution and then say, can we use Scratch, an online programming tool, to design something to raise awareness around ocean pollution? We experiment with different types of design challenges. Some are more close-ended. So sort of the process of designing could be same across all kids. But sometimes we also experimented with design challenges, real world problems that are open-ended, where all kids sort of design different things to answer that, to come up with a solution to that real world problem. I think it's important. I mean, research also suggests that when you situate activities in sort of real world problems, the kids seem to sort of connect with their lives easily and see themselves in doing those practices.
Sinem, certainly a great talk, and it was really great that you were able to transition to this hybrid mode and be able to, work with the kids at home. And per your slides, it looks like you're going to do some sort of fraction of that going forward, and it really is a great opportunity to really expand students participating in your program. What might be some recommendations you give to faculty who really are in the beginning and would like to start a Maker after-school program on their campuses?
One of the things that's, I think, important is we're at CSU, and we are, as an institution, focused on community engagement and community engaged scholarship. So I think it's important to utilize service learning, and looking at our courses and how we can incorporate service learning is really important. And also trying to think sort of low cost interventions, and talking to the community partners and hearing what they need and what can do, and really turn this into a sort of a community of practice endeavor is really important. And I think starting small is really important. We just did one class to sort of see if this works. It's almost like we wanted to sort of try something out, and if we failed, we learn from our failures and then improve next time. So I think utilizing service learning infrastructure and our institutions and transforming sort of our teaching as well as our sort of research and scholarship around this is really important. So think big, implement small, fail fast early, and then work with other people to sort of grow your making program.
Great presentation. Our next speaker is Lynn Cominsky from Sonoma State University, Dream, Make, and Innovate, a service learning class. Lynn.
Thanks, Frank. I'm very happy to be here today to tell you about an NSF-funded program that we have been running since 2017 at Sonoma State University. This program was initiated by a professor in my department, Jeremy Qualls, and his wife, Siyahhan, who have now unfortunately both moved to the University of Southern Maine, and was also done, the education research piece was done in collaboration with Professor Ed Lyon, who's in the education department. So an overview of the project: we received about $600,000 in funding from the NSF iUse program. We didn't get it on our first try. It was the second try of the proposal, and I got involved in this attempt at rewriting and revising and resubmitting the program when it failed the first time. And we basically were interested in following up on something our students had originated. So we had students in around 2015 to 2016 that really wanted to learn more skills and tool use. And so there were a couple of really good students, and they were teaching the other students. And then we tried a second year to have those students teach the next group of students, but unfortunately they weren't as good as the first students. So the faculty decided, well, if we're really going to be serious about teaching these making skills to students and just general tool use for doing experimental physics projects, we were going to have to make our own class to teach that. And so then that one thing led to another, and we decided we also wanted to have a whole makerspace. But we needed to have a makerspace in a centrally located place so that students from across the campus could use the facility, not just engineering or physics students. And so we partnered with the Sonoma State Library, who have just been tremendously helpful and wonderfully supportive. We have about a 2,000 square foot space in the library, into which we put all of the equipment that was funded by the NSF grant. But just building the makerspace was not really the point of the NSF grant, because if anyone's written proposals, you know you have to have a research intellectual merit aspect of these things. And so part of this was to create this class, Science 220, for second year students so that they would learn these skills and hopefully feel more confident, get over imposter syndrome, and feel like they could become STEM majors. So in order to cast the widest possible net, we decided to have this class be an Area E GE class with a focus on lifelong learning and self-development. And so the idea was that students would unleash their creative potential and use that energy to solve problems eventually in partnership with local community groups after they've built their skills up. And so we also had the research components for this grant, educational research done by Professor Ed Lyon into STEM and maker identity formation, which has turned out to be very interesting. And then we had an external evaluation team at WestEd doing statistical research with our Office of Institutional Research into whether this approach was successful in attracting STEM majors and retaining them and keeping them in the major. So we had several different kinds of research going on. So this is just some little pictures of the 2,000 square foot makerspace in the library. It has all of the things you would expect. Sewing machines, embroidery machines, 3D scanners, laptop computers, carvies to do routing, a vinyl cutter, heat presses, mugs, 3D printers, laser cutters, sublimation printers, button makers, and soldering stations. And so there's really a lot of great equipment. It takes a little while to get certified on it. But other people will be telling you more about how they made their makerspaces. I want to concentrate on what we did with the Science 220 class. Oh, and I should mention we also have a whole little virtual reality lab down the hall from the Makerspace, and more work is being done on that through a new grant, IU's HSI grant that was a multi-campus grant that Frank Gomez led and that our campus is participating in. So what about the Science 220 class? Well, we start with service learning elements throughout the class from the beginning, and any people out there who have been learning about service learning pedagogy, which includes me because I didn't really know too much about it before I started teaching the class, there are a lot of reflection elements, a lot of writing elements. The service learning for the undergraduate students really occurs when they engage in these reflection pieces. So as the first thing that we do in the class is we have them learn how to make a journal. So that's a sort of bookbinding skill, and they can decorate it up. And then they use that journal to answer questions and do all their project planning for the rest of the semester. The approach begins with teaching two-dimensional design. So we start with teaching everyone Adobe Illustrator and how to use two-dimensional equipment such as the carvies and the vinyl cutters. And then as we progress through the semester, they move on to three-dimensional design, and they are, learn to do the 3D printing and the 3D scanning and use the laser cutter and some of the more sophisticated machines that we have in the Makerspace. We have two different kinds of projects. So we work in small groups, and then we have weekly labs where the students learn skills. But for the projects, we work in small groups. And so the first project is called a discovery project, where students just create something of interest to the people in their group. It has to be some kind of interactive book, toy, or game. or anything else that interests them, but it has to have an interactive element. And then the second major set of projects are called partner projects. And these are the ones where they have to pick a community partner. We rounded up a bunch. They express their needs. They have to go meet with them, try to determine more about what they really need, and then work with them to create something that will fit that need. And then if it's successful, we give that artifact to the partner at the end of the semester. And so one thing that I introduced when I was teaching the class is the use of the Agile or Sprint method for the iteration within these different projects. So we have 3 sprint cycles usually per project. Each one takes about a week. We go through the whole sprint methodology. Our external evaluation board was tremendously impressed by the fact that we use the sprint method because that is what is used by real companies. And then finally, at the end of the semester, everybody does a final project team presentation. And of course, the very important service learning piece, the final reflections on how it all went with their team, reflections on the team, reflections on the process, reflections on the project. So we do have results. This has been a particularly challenging 5-year period for people that live in Sonoma County. The Makerspace itself had a tremendously wonderful, exciting grand opening on October 4th, 2017. And then on October 9th, 2017, we were hit with the beginnings of this period of wildfires that is still plaguing us. Hopefully not this year. But the campus shut down for a couple of weeks, and then we had smoke. And so it was the beginning of the disruption, even years before the pandemic continued to disrupt things. But we did get some data from that semester from our institutional research study that showed that the students that were enrolled in the class in the fall 2017 semester were significantly more likely to remain enrolled in the spring compared to control groups, but unfortunately not specifically as STEM majors. It's been even more challenging since then to collect equivalent data because we had continued disruptions, and then we had the pandemic, and then everything switched to online. And so you can't use a Makerspace if you're all online. What happened with that evolution was that we just concentrated on the 2D designs and the use of Adobe Illustrator, which people could have on their online computers at home, to create things that were maybe not quite as hands-on, more like displays or informational kiosks, that kind of thing as a project. But here are some of the projects that we could do when we were actually still in the lab. So this is a portable weather station that was done to take up to one of our preserves to track the weather and to send the data back to campus. So the class has clearly evolved to meet the needs of the students as well as the partners. The service learning pedagogy is complete through the final reflection piece. The class has moved from being supported by the NSF money to being institutionalized, which means, people get credit for teaching the class, and the students are taking a class that's just normally listed in the course catalog. But service learning is a big part of Sonoma State's mission, and so we're really happy to have been able to add a motivational purpose to this class through the service learning component. So here's another example of one of the artifacts that was made. We actually gave this one to the local health center. They needed interactive books to entertain children in the waiting rooms. And so it's all covered in plastic so you can clean it, for example. And there's interactive elements here. This one takes your temperature. So some of the lessons that we learned are that sprint cycles are essential to keep the students on track. If you just give them a project and give them 3 weeks, they will wait till the end of the 3 weeks and then start to do the work. If you make them do an iterative sprint cycle that only lasts 1 week and they have to show you progress on a weekly basis, you can keep them on track and keep them moving forward to get the projects completed. And so the projects really did get completed once we introduced the whole sprint methodology. Another thing we learned about service learning is that students really need to be encouraged to think deeply when asked to reflect about their experiences. They like to say that everyone else in the team did a great job and they could have done better, for example. We found imposter syndrome about making across students of all genders. We found a great reluctance of female students to lead teams that had mixed genders, and that was personally disappointing to me, being a woman teaching a maker class with my lab assistant also being female. But students really were very enthusiastic about helping others in the community. So the class has not met in person now since the pandemic. It was online for a couple semesters. We hope to resume offering this class in person now that the campus is opened back up, so next fall would be our next opportunity. We have attempted to write a multi-campus proposal. I had partners at San Luis Obispo and at Sac State to try to bring this concept of centrally located makerspaces to other campus libraries. But the proposal has not yet succeeded, so we have to rethink that and see what we can do about it to improve that. But we'll be circling back on that with the help of STEMnet. So in summary, NSFIU's paid for all of this, the Makerspace and the creation of the course. The Makerspace itself is increasing in popularity. Now that campus is open again, I expect to see lots of people back in there doing things. We have some evidence that teaching making skills increases confidence in students that will lead them to declare STEM majors. And our research into making and STEM identity continues. A paper about that research has been submitted. I was hoping I could say it was accepted, but not quite yet. It's in a revise and resubmit process. And we hope to return to in-person instruction with this program very soon. I'll be glad to answer any questions. You can always just write to me and at any time of day or night, and I will answer your questions if we don't have time here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Interesting talk, and I like the picture of the Earth when Earth takes a sick day. Okay. And I know you alluded to some of this already, but maybe you have some specific, some more specific examples you want to provide. How were the Makerspace activities and class affected by the pandemic?
Right. So clearly we couldn't hold the class in person in the Makerspace as we had been doing before the pandemic. Even with all of the dismissal of classes for fires and smoke, we at least were able to come back to campus and use the equipment. We have upgraded some of the equipment in the past couple of years since we've been shut down. But basically, the class just became an online class, and we used a lot of software tools and Adobe Illustrator and layout tools rather than using three-dimensional tools that could make hands-on artifacts.
We had these discussions, and a number of proposals are really engaged in these areas in how one could make projects very community-oriented. What were some of the needs of your community partners there in and around Sonoma State that were targets for your service learning projects?
So we had a couple of health centers that we partnered with. So you did see the example of one of the cute books that was made. It was not the only cute interactive book that was made. We had after-school clubs that wanted games for the students to play. So we had a few different games that were takeoffs on things like foosball or balls dropping through mazes that you could steer with things, those kinds of games that we gave to after-school clubs. We had some farms that needed things like a play structure for their goats. Well, obviously, we couldn't really make that, but we made little models out of them for 3D printers. We had people that wanted to learn how to clear garbage out of a stream. So we had models that we made of those, but we didn't make the ones in the real stream. So sometimes we just modeled the solutions because they were too expensive, and sometimes we could actually make the artifacts and give them to people.
The types of projects, down here in SoCal, farms and streams would not be high on the list of things we would incorporate. But certainly, Lynn, great talk, and we appreciate your time in participating today.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Our next speaker is Chris Bachman from California State University, Los Angeles, and creating a makerspace at Cal State, LA. Chris.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks STEMnet for inviting me to talk a little bit today about the creating of the makerspace at Cal State, LA. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our process, which started in about 2015, which was kind of a 5-year process, which went from kind of having a lot of disparate spaces where students could design and build that were, not as well equipped as they could be because it was not centrally located, and access was also, and training was difficult. So really kind of envisioning a space where students could really go and, if they had an idea for something or a problem they wanted to solve, they could design and build and kind of execute on that. And so I'm Chris Bachman, a faculty member at Cal State LA in the mechanical engineering department. And so this process started in about fall 2015 for us. And actually the need really came out of seeing that a lot of our senior design projects were not getting through the full design process. They were having trouble with designing for manufacture and being able to build something and test it and then get to kind of iterate on that process. And so we kind of embarked on a process to introduce more hands-on and project-based learning throughout the kind of engineering curriculum, starting with kind of a freshman design lab where they now build a small submersible as part of a lab. And that was spearheaded with some kind of Boeing and Navy funding. Next, kind of as a part of the strategic initiatives of our dean, we wanted to think about, what were kind of some of the objectives we wanted to get out of creating a kind of a large-scale kind of makerspace. And so we had a donor donate about $100,000, which at the time was used to hire some consultants and begin to kind of talk to a lot of the stakeholders and visualize what they wanted out of the space and what it could be. And so, but what actually ended up coming out of that was this kind of $15 million vision for a total renovation of maybe a third of our building. And so this was kind of like, this may or may not ever happen. And so I got hired on at this time, and there was a few of us that were kind of like looking at our objectives and thinking, well, there's a few spaces that aren't heavily used, and if we can get buy-in, a few of us just with a little bit of sweat and elbow grease could probably make something that would suffice or would be able to provide a lot of those objectives. And so at this point, it was about fall 2017, and a few of us began to, work with those in the college to secure a space to, let me try turning on my webcam. I'm not sure why it turned off and on. There we go. Sorry about that. Secure a space to be able to do this. And also we began to kind of look for different funding sources. And so to start, we ended up getting some funding from the Pasadena City College, and then ended up applying for some funding from the W.M. Keck Foundation, which was more focused on kind of the creation of the space and the hiring of students with some educational research, but not to the extent that an NSF grant would be at. And so we really kind of grew the space until the pandemic, and so now we're kind of in the process of regrowing the space. So just to give you a sense of what it looks like and how we design the space is, so we kind of designed the space to go from kind of a dirty to clean from corner to corner. So kind of over here on the right, we have kind of a conference room, and then like solid modeling software and CAM software for generating toolpaths for automated equipment. Over kind of in our kind of main area, we have just kind of a common area with movable tables, movable whiteboards, and most of these tables and whiteboards are actually made by students and staff and faculty. So we were able to do stuff on kind of a short budget. We were doing a lot of this before we had a lot of our funding. Over here, we also have, sewing machines, some electronics equipment, some assembly equipment, and we also keep a lot of our forming, CNC, laser cutters, 3D printers. And actually, the laser cutter has been by far, I think, our most useful instrument. If there's one instrument I was going to start off my makerspace with, it would probably be a laser cutter. I find the parts the students make are much more usable than 3D printers, and if they're creative, they can actually make a lot of things with it. And as we kind of transition kind of back into the corner of the space, we kind of have our more traditional kind of machine shop space, the manual lathes, mills, bandsaws, drill presses, all the way down to kind of a water jet and welding and grinding facility where it's just kind of the loudest and dirtiest. But it's nice because it's separated by some distance where you're able to kind of do some of the ideation without being bothered by some of the more heavy kind of manufacturing processes. And yeah, so you can kind of see too that you know, it seems like some of the other makerspaces are probably paired with maybe a more traditional machine shop for their engineering students. But, you know, this was also really the first time that we really created kind of this space where students could not only work with, you know, 3D printing and plastics and textiles, but also work with more traditional manufacturing methods. I think the laser is 150 watt CO2 laser, but I'd have to double check to be sure about that, Patrick. So here's just kind of some pictures of the space. And so the top is kind of a panoramic view of kind of the prototyping space. You can see, you know, a lot of the tables just are on wheels. We have some small drill presses that are on wheels, some small woodworking stuff that students can move around. We also even have like projector screens that were made were donated or were made by a volunteer who works with our senior design. They just thought they needed it, and so they welded it up in the space. And so we have this little movable projector screen, all the way to kind of like forming equipment, laser cutter in the back, and a couple CNCs. And then we have our more kind of traditional machining space. And I don't know, one thing I guess to say about a lot of this stuff is we've been really fortunate in that a lot of it making the space, we had a lot of shops around campus that were slowly kind of shutting down. And so we were able to kind of find equipment in different places and bring it into our space, or find people that weren't using their equipment that wanted to get rid of it. And so, you know, I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of our equipment was actually donated from other places that we were able to kind of pull into the space and didn't need to go and buy stuff. And so, you know, and I think kind of the key to our space is really the people in it. And so we have Nikki is our shop supervisor. She's a previous mechanical engineering student, and we've had upwards of 10 students before the pandemic. Now we're about down to 4. But I'll probably reiterate this again at the end, but I think a lot of what's made our life easy as the people who run and kind of manage and started the space was that we kind of shared our vision and also like asked what our students' vision was for the space, and really got a lot of buy-in from a lot of different students who wanted to work in the space, and that they really kind of took by the horns and were able to execute on a lot of stuff that saved us a ton of time. You know, they were able to carry the ball 90% of the way, and then we just had to do you know, a little bit of oversight and check on things. But, you know, I wasn't being asked about where things should go and stuff. The students had a layout and they proposed it to, and when they really saw that they saw the need for it and wanted to help their fellow students, you know, they really kind of fell in love with doing it. So that was one aspect that really I wasn't too strategic about it, to be honest, but it just kind of happened, and it really made my life a lot easier just to have, you know, a kind of community of students helping build the space and not just be a few faculty trying to do it. So kind of some of the activities that we have in our shop, we run 2 courses out of the shop. The mechanical engineering and technology both have a kind of machining based course that's in the shop. We also run just regular workshops for all the different equipment. Just, you know, we want to get students in and out. We use kind of a Google form for signups, and that seems to work okay. It's definitely far from ideal. We used to do more paper-based signups in the space. Yeah, definitely. Anyone can feel free to email me, and I'll share some any of our kind of safety procedures that we use. And then other stuff that we have is a lot of senior design students, a lot of research. The student clubs are really take advantage of space, and then personal projects. We have a lot of you know, our kind of rule in the space is like, if you're in the space and you're going to be learning, you can work on whatever you'd like. And so whether it's something for your house or your car, your siblings, like this top right one were giveaways for a student's little sister's birthday party, and they were in there using the laser cutter form. And so yeah, I mean, we see actually some really cool stuff come out of just like stuff unrelated to their courses. So during the pandemic, it was, you know, I think as everyone said, kind of tough, especially for these very hands-on type spaces, but we kind of transitioned to having more of kind of a YouTube presence and doing Instagram, and we're able to kind of create content for, you know, we have some videos on like working with our CNCs, some like advanced SolidWorks videos, some advanced Mastercam videos, which, you know, managed to have, you know, over 10,000 views, some of them now. And so there's some desire for this content if you can make it well. And I've been impressed with the students' ability to work with Adobe-based like video editing software that it's far better than my skills, and really to make these video is good. And we had they had a lot of time that we that they would have otherwise used to work in the space, and so instead they were able to actually learn a lot of this stuff and kind of execute on it, which is great. So we also do a bit of outreach, although it's something we're, I think, trying to grow back a bit. We work a lot with our MESA program, so we have a really great MESA program on campus, and that's really great for us to connect with because they really help us, bring in students from the local community in the K through 12 and to build things. And so we do everything from tours, but we're always trying to make kind of something, I don't know, a little bit hands-on and a little bit building, and I don't know, let the students kind of break something and have something to remember that they had fun about. And so we usually do like some laser cutting projects where they make some sauce that can kind of like you pull on the strings and they climb up, so they're pretty fun. Or we sometimes will do some bridge building competitions for some of the older students and talk about triangulation and avoiding bending, and they're kind of like little erector sets that we laser cut out that they can build together to compete with. And so that's been fun. And these are all kind of student designed at some point. So it's always cool to see what they come up with. So yeah, I'd say some of our biggest challenges and things that are lessons learned, I think we're always trying to balance kind of ease of access to the equipment and the safety and like maintenance of the machines. It's like you can have weeks and weeks of training, but then no one's using any of the equipment. So yeah, they're relatively safe and you don't have to fix any of your equipment, but no one's actually using it. And so I find we're always kind of oscillating around, like trying to find that sweet spot there. Another challenge we always, but so I don't know, for the lesson learned there for me is just, I don't know, be reflective and constant, don't be afraid to kind of change what you're doing. And so I think we've slowly gotten to a place where, the students are working safely and the maintenance is minimized, but you also have good usage. Consistent training and care for the space varies widely because we have a lot of instructors that teach in the space, and then a lot of different staff that do workshops, and so it'll vary a bit. And so I think creating good documentation is always nice for people to refer back to. But we still have challenges because we have people that have been teaching this stuff for a long time, and so they have the way they want to do it. And so we just, I don't know, address stuff in person early. And that seems to work out, although it's always something I think we're going to work through. And then we've always had trouble actually hiring full-time staff members too. We're able to get people with kind of who share a vision for the space, but we always find that we're probably, get a real skilled, person in the trades, or you need someone who's really dynamic to really run these spaces. These people are in high demand, and we don't pay that much as kind of staff members, especially considering we're in the LA area. And so that's always been tough, but I've really leaned on our students to fill in the gaps between our having full staff members. And right now we're really working to reintroduce the space to the student body from the pandemic. I mean, we're fully remote for 2 years, and so a lot of our regular users have graduated, and so we're going out to classes where we put a sandwich board out front for advertised people to come in. We let them make free keychains with their names on it to get them introduced to the space. So that's kind of a constant process. I think other thing is identifying lasting funding sources. It's tough. We have kind of the KEC grant for a little bit longer, but we're always looking for kind of continuing to do that. And so the last bit is, one way we're able to do that is we really kind of take advantage of a lot of small funding sources, a lot of under $10,000 funding sources. So we find little pots of money from the college or the department, or even sometimes we'll ask, if certain classes are using the space, if they can contribute, under $1,000. And so usually we can actually go a long way with buying little bits of things for folks. And then I mentioned this a couple times, but really leveraging kind of your student body and your community around to help you build the space, and getting their input really helps. And yeah, so that's a little bit about our Makerspace at Cal State LA, and I'll open up some time to answer a few questions.
So thank you, Chris. Just one quick question for you, and if you don't mind, there's a number of questions in the open chat addressed to you. If you don't mind, after we complete here addressing them, that'd be great. They have a lot of interest in your talk. Very quickly, how important is support from the college, and in what ways did this manifest itself?
Yeah, I think we're especially lucky in the development of our space in that our dean was very in line with our vision for the space. And so everything from kind of getting kind of some of the political, I guess, capital that you need to secure a space in the college. Like that was the first thing that, it took a lot with meeting with the college and the dean and kind of sharing this vision for what the space needed to be and convincing other departments to give up some space to have this shared space took a lot. All the way down to we get funding for our space in terms of the college will hire students on occasion for us. Well, even there's instructionally related activities funds that the dean will help us tap into, as well as helping us access a lot of our alumni, because these are like spaces I think the alumni are really excited about. And so I think tapping into the alumni network and even hosting alumni events or open house events in the space, we've kind of opened up a fund that people can donate to for the space. And that's been very successful in kind of allowing us to have some additional money. And to kind of answer one of the questions in the chat too, in terms of long-term funding, I think donations has helped us give us a little bit of a slush fund for where we need. And then we've also kind of, I think, get the departments a little bit to realize just how valuable the space is to kind of contribute around there. So I think all of those have been big and kind of allowing us to get to a place where I think as our funding tails down, that we'll be in a place where we can run sustainably.
Presentation. Thanks for participating today. Our next speakers are Andrea Medina and Bobby Hartsock from CSU Bakersfield, CSU Bakersfield Fab Lab Best Practices.
Thank you, Frank, and good morning, everyone. In 2014, the Bakersfield Fab Lab first opened its doors. We were the first of the initial 10 that Chevron had funded, and we are part of the Fab Network, which has about 2,500 worldwide Fab Labs. And we'll be going over just 3 key areas of our lab, and we'll be taking questions at the end. We'll be going over our staffing model, funding, and programming.
So for staffing, we're very proud of how we've got our staffing and our onboarding process set up. So we've got student interns who work in the lab. We've got both paid and unpaid interns. The way it works is there is a Fab Lab internship class the students get course credit for, and every week is a new machine or a new process, a new topic, and they are required to spend a certain number of hours in the lab. And it usually does not take that full number of hours to learn the equipment, and the extra time in there they spend helping other students with their projects. And so we get to essentially kind of have a trial run of those students, and we can figure out if they're good, if they're personable, if they have good soft skills, if they make people feel welcome. The equipment is fairly easy to train people on, but the soft skills are much more difficult. And so we from there we can see who would be good candidates to transition to paid interns. And then as our paid interns graduate, we'll find other jobs out in the community professionally. We'll bring on some of our unpaid interns, transition them to paid. We also have work study eligibility. The Fab Lab qualifies for that, so some of our interns can get paid that way, so it doesn't come out of our funding for the lab. And then we also had STEM Vista as part of the AmeriCorps program. And so they also helped out. There were 2 different types. There were summer AmeriCorps Vistas, and they helped direct activities, like directly working with students over the summer. And then there was the full year AmeriCorps Vista, and they work more on the programming side, doing more sustainable activities as opposed to directly working with people.
As far as our funding structure, as I mentioned, our initial seed money did come from Chevron. They did provide us $1 million of funding. We continue to be supported through other corporate donations, Edison International, and a couple other companies. We work very closely with our university advancement team. They do write a lot of outreach, K-12 outreach specifically, for funding opportunities. We also do receive some private donations. During the pandemic, we assisted a high school student who developed a specific face shield for dentists. And the dentists in our area were so grateful that they actually started donating personal funds to the Fab Lab for our assistance with that student. We also do provide summer camps for typically middle school kids, and those are for profit. Those are usually week-long opportunities, and we can take up to between 10 and 12 students depending on the activity within our lab. And then for our day-to-day expenses, we charge, our students are charged one for one. So whatever we pay for an item, that's what our students pay. And so, you know, it's not a money-making thing for us. It's just covering our expenses. That way we are able to continue to supply for other people. And we do encourage people to bring in their own supplies if they like. Because there's no charge to use our lab or our equipment. As far as our student programming, one of our biggest opportunities is our rowdy cart race. We have a relatively new engineering program, and our faculty were a bit surprised to find out that a large number of our incoming freshmen had never worked with hand tools before. And so an activity we came up with over a period of probably about a year and a half was this engineering design challenge for the freshman class. And so each group is given approximately 2 bicycles that we receive these donations from our Bakersfield Police Department property room and our Sheriff's Department property room. They regularly donate the unclaimed bicycles to our university, and then we issue these out to the students, and then they're given a set amount of supplies that they need to work with in order to break down the bicycles and then build a 3-wheeled human-powered vehicle. And the only rules is that it just can't be a tandem bike. It actually has to be a 3-wheeled vehicle. And at the end of the semester, we have a large competition where it is they race, and they also go through an obstacle course. And so just before the pandemic, we had such a large group of students participate. We even had some high school students, and we also had 2 out of the area community colleges participate as well.
So we have student-only access hours. This is usually related to campus groups. So for example, IEEE, one of the times they wanted to put on a soldering tutorial workshop for their members. So we closed the lab for that, allowed them to kind of have a dedicated workspace for that. We also do some research project requests. So for example, one of the things that we did is we worked with San Francisco Wireless Emergency Mesh and did a project with the Naval Postgraduate School, GFX, and we built a little RC truck basically that was controlled over a mesh network. Some of our faculty will work on research projects as well. One of them had a water turbine project, so 3D printed out some different paddles. I forget the correct term for it, but tested different shapes for the water turbine.
As far as our K-12 outreach programming, we developed what we call the Connecting High-Tech Education to Youth program, or SHAE, and that was named after our first STEM Vista that we had. Her name was Siyahhan, and she developed all these outreach activities that we could take to the classroom. And so when we have proper staffing, we do a lot of outreach in the community where we'll go to different classrooms and provide a small activity for the kids to try. We also have a children's center here on campus that they are much younger, so they're pre-K, and they'll come in and learn how to use basic equipment, more like how to type letters on the keyboard so that they can then print out their name with a vinyl cutter, and then learning those fine motor skills with their fingers to tweeze out some of the stickers. We also had Roadrunner Science Fridays. We would welcome high school groups onto campus, and we would split them up into smaller groups where there'll be some of the kids will be taking tours around campus while another group is actually in the Fab Lab doing a short activity, and then we'll rotate those groups around. And then we also have had the Maker in a Box kits. That was developed by another one of our STEM Vistas, where we provided all the materials for a teacher to use in the classroom. So it would typically be a 30 to 60 minute activity that could be done in the classroom, and everything they needed would be in this particular kit. That has since exploded into the Scopes network. That's a database for K-12 teachers, and that's all been standardized, and we can provide more information if anyone is interested in that after the presentation.
Okay, so we've done some K-12 teacher training here with the local Kern High School district teachers. We found that a lot of them either had a lot of the Makerspace equipment or were interested in purchasing it, but they, for example, were a little bit nervous about doing so for fear of, essentially breaking it. And so we brought them in, and it qualified as continuing education for them, and we were able to show them how all the equipment worked. We were able to really build up their confidence. And so those that had the equipment were then able to go back and actually incorporate that into their classroom programs, or they were comfortable purchasing the equipment and adding it to their school. We've also had, as Andrea mentioned, the for-profit camps, and also a couple of nonprofit camps as well, but they were just the summer camp programs that we've done. The paid ones were kind of split up into either a very open-ended or a guided project. The open-ended ones, we essentially just teach them the basics of how the equipment works, and they make whatever they want. And then the guided ones kind of focus on a specific project. And then we did also a program for at-risk youth with the Bakersfield Police Activities League and the Sheriff's Activities League as kind of a thank you for their donation of bicycles. And so we were able to teach those people, those students, how to use the equipment in the lab and get them excited about digital fabrication. We've also got some after-school programs as well. The Girl Scouts Boys and Girls Club and Boy Scouts come in typically on a monthly basis, and we walk them through the equipment, how to use it, and little theme things. So for like Earth Day, for example, the Girl Scouts would bring in all of their old cardboard boxes of Girl Scout cookies, and we would laser cut them, or show them how to laser cut them into different shapes and stuff like that. And then we also have our open access community hours, and so the vast majority of our open hours fall into that category. So we are open actually to the public, so anyone can come in and use the lab. We're more than happy to train them. We don't do mass production, we don't do manufacturing, it's just all prototyping. So if someone wants to come and print out or laser cut, 2,000 keychains, well, this isn't really the place for that, but if you want to make an example and then take it to a local fabricator and have that made, then we're more than happy to help with that sort of activity.
And we are officially out of time, so we are happy to take questions.
So great, nice presentation. Question here, how is your lab adjusting to reopening in person?
So it has, it's been both easy and a challenge. Nearly all of our student assistants and interns have graduated while the campus was closed, so we've had to onboard a whole new round of interns. But then on the other hand, due to the COVID restrictions, it's reduced the number of people that have been able to visit the lab, and so it's been kind of a smoother transition as opposed to being immediately slammed with a huge gathering of people. So it's worked out fairly well for us.
So great. Well, I appreciate your presentation. I think there's a question in the chat box for you, and looking forward to hearing more about yours in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is Erin Cole from Maritime. making a makerspace, finding and fostering a creative campus community. Erin.
Right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Cole. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Makerspace technician at Maritime. So 2 years ago, I was brought in to open the space and turn it into a useful resource for campus. Prior to me being hired, there was already some legwork that was done to open the space, including getting this room that I'm currently sitting in, some furniture, a few various tools like 3D printers, a sewing machine, and some hand tools. And there was also already initial funding. There was a grant from Northrop Grumman to make those purchases. So my goal was to come in and open the space and get students to come in, faculty, staff, and turn it into that useful resource. So through this presentation, I'll kind of walk through what my thought process was on developing the space and how you might collaborate with one that exists on your campus or create a new one, and reflect on how the Makerspace has been doing so far and where we're hoping to move in the future. So first, a little bit of context. Cal Maritime is a small campus. We have about 880 students, or cadets as they're referred to here. It already has a huge machine shop and welding lab capacity within the technology center, and the majority of students study some kind of engineering or marine technology. And so the space, as it runs now, was officially opened in January 2020. It operates within the School of Engineering, just partially out of organizational convenience. There was a room available within that technology center, and a lot of engineering professors were big proponents of the space itself. However, it is open to everyone on campus, students, faculty, and staff, and it's a general resource for projects both class and personal. It's free to use, as well as any materials in the space are available for people to use. And we have drop-in hours, 9 to 5, every weekday. We have trainings on all of our tools so that we can make sure that everyone is learning how to use them safely and effectively. We host events regularly, and we have 4 student assistants who are all paid and help with everything that is that we do to run the space. And since it opened in January 2020, the tool capacity has grown immensely. As you can see with the pictures there, it was a fairly empty room to start with, and it is now pretty full. So we now have 6 3D printers permanently in the space and 18 that are available for loan. We have a laser cutter, embroidery machine, soldering stations, a vinyl cutter, woodworking tools, and more. So how did we get here? When I was in college, I was actually a student worker at a makerspace as well. So I came in with some understanding of how these spaces operate and what I would like to see done on this campus and what I would like to see be done differently compared to the campus I worked at. So I wanted to start by articulating a mission for this space, so being a space for all kinds of projects, and thinking about the audience. Who would it serve? The atmosphere of the space. What kind of space should it be? How should people feel when they're in the room? And the connection of how it would relate to campus. So based on that, I came up with 4 adjectives that I wanted to use to describe the space: creative, welcoming, collaborative, and functional. And so from that list of adjectives, it was important to create a list of action items to be able to make those adjectives come to life, to guide my behavior and to guide the design of the space. For example, a welcoming space reduces reliance on jargon so that there's a lower barrier to entry to using all the tools and feeling like a space isn't for you. Similarly, we wanted to make sure that we were uplifting all kinds of making and not just kind of the novel techie stuff. So sewing is on the same level as 3D printing. And then from there, it was important to get to know campus itself. We knew what we wanted the space to be when you're in the space, but we wanted to figure out how it would relate to the rest of campus. We knew we wanted to prioritize students, and so we looked at everything through that lens. When would the space be useful to students? So when are classes? What are classes? What are student interests outside of classes? Because we needed to get their engagement in order for the space to fulfill its mission. So when we were thinking about how the space would fit into campus, we strongly recommend looking at asset mapping. So if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a way of visualizing or describing existing campus strengths and resources. So mainly for the Makerspace, we were looking at those classes that are already there, clubs, student activities, and previous audiences we could tap into. So what you see on the screen is a kind of super simplified version of a chart that we could use as an asset map. So an asset map can be very literal, where it's a picture of campus and you put pinpoints on all the different spots that are related to it, or it can be a chart list whatever. It's just a way of making sure you are tapping into those existing networks, finding bridges, and finding gaps. So we're looking at spaces, organizations, and existing people. For the Makerspace, that included community engagement, School of Engineering, associated students, housing, the library, the machine shop and welding lab, and more. A Makerspace is made by the people who use it and how they use it, so every Makerspace will be unique in this way. And also it was important to think about the assets the Makerspace had to offer campus. So how could we bridge those gaps? We had tools, we have space for projects and meetings, design and fabrication expertise, and a community gathering space. So with that in mind, we're able to move forward with those relationships. And the reason behind this is because it was the easiest way to launch the Makerspace into the campus eye. By building off of existing audiences, we could foster strong and repeatable connections and grow our user base while integrating the Makerspace into campus culture. Some examples of this are the engineering classes. This is an easy first step. Motors and electronics classes have historically used 3D printers for class projects and on a very large scale. In the past, actually, a professor had a 3D printer at home and would print student projects around the clock for days on end. So by redirecting that traffic flow, we were able to create structure, an additional audience, and reduce the load on the professors themselves. Similarly, the library had previously hosted Maker Days, which were little one-off events every month that focused on some kind of creativity, and often with times was a craft. And so we were able to move those into the Makerspace and collaborate with the library on those Maker Days to tap into that already really engaged and strong audience of people interested in these creative activities. The exposure to the space hopefully would bring students back. So once students knew about this space, they would come in with new projects, come in with their friends, and spread by word of mouth. Because on a campus as small as ours, word of mouth matters a lot. A quick note on engineering, though. We realized that it was going to be incredibly easy for the space to slide into just being an engineer space, and that was really important for us to avoid. Based on the location of the space and the classes that use it most often, it was really set up to create those barriers. So the Makerspace is located within the Technology Center, which is where most engineering classes take place, where that machine shop and welding lab is. And during project deadlines, the electronics and capstone classes can really dominate the space. So it was important for us to take a conscious effort to break down the real and perceived barriers to the space. Students, as has been mentioned in previous presentations, students without a background in tools, especially if they don't get exposure to them through their classes, might feel more intimidated coming into the space than a student who has had that practice. So we wanted to make it clear that the space is for creativity, first and foremost, and the form that that takes is up to the user. So part of how we did this was through really intentional non-engineering campus outreach. So this is where that asset map really came in handy, because the engineering connections were obvious and easy, but they're not the only option. So by leaning into our other partnerships or other campus organizations, we're able to create those strong partnerships. So we often collaborate with community engagement on service projects, the library on their Maker Days or using their space, peer health educators, the residential housing officers, so those are all student-led events, counseling and psychological services for stress-busting crafts, and more. So what you see on the screen is just a small number of examples of different projects and events we've run over the past couple years that were driven by student needs and interests. So if students, for example, express interest in making resin dice, we listened to that and got that in order so we can teach resin crafting, but also engage students in a way that they like, because there's a pretty big role-playing game community on campus. So some of the examples of things that we have run in the past: printmaking, drawing robots, knitting service projects, jewelry, and student assistants also make projects to improve and shape the space as well. In some ways, we've gotten really lucky because the Makerspace at Cal Maritime is able to fill a really unique niche. On campus, there are simultaneously few opportunities for creative expression, but many opportunities for class projects in certain majors. Cal Maritime lacked an open-ended space like this before the Makerspace, so students have really jumped at the opportunity for something so unstructured, fun, and new. But we wanted to be able to document this. So since the space opened, we've been taking data on the training workshops that have been completed. as well as kind of usage headcounts throughout the day to see how much the space is getting used. And from this, we've drafted annual reports. Admittedly, the data is a little bit odd because timing of the Makerspace. It opened about 2 months before the campus officially shut down for COVID. And although it's been in person since August 2020 with some usage restrictions, last semester was the first semester where all students were on campus in person, and the semester didn't get cut short. So in reality, that has been our only normal semester. But with that in mind, we still have been able to train about 300 students, mostly on 3D printing, and establish really consistent and engaging partnerships with faculty and other campus organizations. And it's become a space where students express that they feel safe and can have fun. And so we've learned a lot along the way over the past couple years, and here are some of the key takeaways. So it's important to know your plan and be clear in your goals and sets to get there, moving from that abstract down to the concrete. And campus visibility and perception matters. The space needs to fit into campus culture, but it doesn't need to match it. And it's also good to use campus's existing assets. Some students are going to be easier to bring in than others. For example, class projects are easy to incorporate because they might need the space, but personal projects can take some work. And so in that, be guided by the students because their buy-in is the most important thing. Having students be invested in the space has helped it and them to thrive. And also seek balance. Notice where you're making blind spots are, what tools you naturally gravitate towards and might ignore others. Notice where tools feel unapproachable and then find ways to ease those barriers. For example, making laser cut jewelry is a way to take a very technical tool and also apply it to something that might feel a little less technical, even though it might take the same amount. 2 years in, it's not just a room with tools anymore. It's a hangout spot, a community center, a place for tutoring and advice, and of course, a workshop. So in the future, our next steps, mostly we want to improve student-assisted autonomy based on some campus rules about keys. They lack a little bit of independence that I would really like to see them have. So our hope is to expand their autonomy with key cards and then also be able to make more flexible hours that are not beholden to my schedule as a full-time staff member. And long-term, the biggest item on our wish list is to expand. Our room is quite small and it is pretty much at max capacity. When I ask students what they'd like to see changed, it's the first thing that comes up every time is they say, I wish it was bigger. So by getting a bigger space, expanding or moving, we hope to accommodate more people, grow inventory, and improve safety because we don't have to worry about people physically bumping into each other. It's been incredible to be able to shape a makerspace and to see the way students have really claimed it for their own. Space has come a long way, and I can't wait to see how it will continue to grow. That is it for me, so thank you. Questions?
Great, thank you, Erin. We have a question here. What types of advice do you have to get more students to come into the space?
Yeah, so like I said, class projects are easy to grab, but personal projects can be tricky, especially because a lot of students have expressed to me that will come into the space and think it's super cool, but have no idea for how to use it. Just don't have a project idea. They want to use the space, but don't know where to start. And so we run projects, events, at least 2 times a month. Last year, once every week, which was a little overwhelming, but really effective at getting students to come in, because that way we can teach a skill, but also provide a framework for a kind of project. So there's a little less stress on them to have come up with a project idea themselves. And those can also be guided by students.
Great, thank you, Erin. Nice presentation. Our next speaker is Michael DeMars from Cal State Fullerton, making it work, building a makerspace during a pandemic.
Hi, everyone. After seeing everything that's so amazing that you guys are doing, I kind of feel like we've sort of saved the least for last because we're still building our makerspace. Hello, I'm Mike DeMars, the Associate Dean of Public Services at the Pollock Library here at CSUF. I've served as the Dean Associate Dean since September 2019. Prior to that, I was a systems and nursing librarian. I've been here at Cal State Fullerton for 13 years. What I'm going to cover today is the brief history of our fledgling makerspace. I'll cover the path of the project from its inception to the pandemic. Then I'll pivot, word of the year, to the more recent history of the makerspace since March 2020. I hope to share with you the lessons I've learned along the way, and I'll also let you know where we are now and where we are headed. So let's get started. So there it is. There's the Makerspace. This is basically an IT project in the library. It was an offshoot of Loft. Some of you might remember that, especially Southern California campuses. It was called the Library of the Future Task Force. And it was a big report that was produced by several CSUs that basically said this is where libraries are headed and this is where we should go. And experiential learning was one of the things that was on there. So IT took that idea and their big budget and ran with it and created this space. So this is on the second floor. It's a large glass box, and you can see the sort of items, I won't read them all off, that are in there. Because IT built it, it's very IT focused. So there's no real low-tech stuff in there. It's mostly computers and whatnot, and there's one 3D printer, I believe. The thing that gets the most use, I believe, is the virtual reality stuff that's in there. So that does get used, but honestly, this is usually what it looks like. It doesn't get heavily used. Whether it's a lack of promotion or it's, maybe no tie to the curriculum, which we'll get into later, I'm not 100% sure, but we basically in the library decided we wanted to be a part of this whole Makerspace program too, but we wanted to focus on lower tech stuff. So we started rethinking the space in fall of 2019, right around the time that I started as Associate Dean. And the first thing we decided to do was to try and take this whole desperate mix of stuff and make sense of it. So we started a little contest from name this space, name the floor, and we came up with the mix, which is pretty good because it's just a mix of a bunch of stuff that we're all trying to tie together. If you'll see in the prior slide here, in the back of the big glass box, there are shelves of books. Those are no longer there. This is the current floor plan. There are now these super high-powered computer stations. I don't know if you can see it or not, but each one of these has the name of a college on it. And so like, for example, this one, the College of the Arts, it's a bunch of computers that are loaded with stuff that is good for artists. Like these have Wacom tablets and really cool stuff. So it's, once again, very tech heavy. So this area down here in blue is the area that we are going to build our lower tech stuff in. Those were smart study rooms that were run by IT. They seeded those back to us. And so now we are going to use them as just individual maker rooms, and I'm going to kind of theme them out. So two of those rooms, IT wanted to dedicate to esports. There was a donor back in fall of 2019 who wanted to give us 8 high-powered gaming computers and was going to maintain them going forward, and we were going to host an esports team in the library. That has sort of dried up a little bit, and I'll get into that in a minute. So we formed a committee. The committee was made up of mostly library folk, but a couple of representatives from IT so that we could still coordinate and we didn't duplicate any purchases. So what we started doing is visiting lots of campuses. Members of the group would go out. We went to every possible kind of place. We went to public libraries. We went to downtown Long Beach, their new library, looked at their space. We went to Cal State Long Beach, which has a different kind of model, like more a client model of a makerspace. And we went to University of Laverne. We went all over the place. And we basically started making lists and purchasing items. And you can kind of see the stuff we were focusing on at the time, like button makers, vinyl cutters, sewing machines, bookmaking supplies, that kind of stuff. But we were, basically kind of buying things off of a list. So, by the way, this picture here, you can see corresponds to that blue room right there, the bigger blue room at the bottom. So that's where we're going to set up our sewing area, is in this area here, sewing and bookmaking. So what happened next? The pandemic. Pollock Library closed mid-March, as did just about everybody else, and we completely shifted focus. We started worrying about starting up services again. So we had people back in the building by August, and we were circulating materials through a locker system. We had to go that whole route. We were even had one floor of the library open as a study space, so we had to manage that. So the Makerspace got completely pushed to the background. But then we learned in the summer that we were going to be going back on campus in August 2021, and it was going to be 65% in person. So we knew people were coming back in, and we knew we had a makerspace that wasn't really done. So we started doing some soul searching, asking ourselves what we were really doing here, and we kind of realized that we were falling into the same sort of trap that got us to where we were, which is we were buying stuff that we thought people would use. So instead of finding out what people really wanted, we said this model's working elsewhere, we'll just apply it here. And I didn't want to wind up with yet another room that is just not being used. So what I did from that point is I reached out to, instead of people who were running the makerspaces, I started looking for people who had made makerspaces, people who were setting them up. And that was like a real eye-opener. Talking to one particular associate dean who had started two different makerspaces, he said that his second one was so much more successful because he involved the faculty in every decision that they made for purchasing of anything. So I really liked that idea, and I reached out to other people on campus, other associate deans, and said, please identify any faculty that you know that might use this kind of material. One thing that that individual also said to me was that because so many outside people were involved, it doesn't feel like the library's makerspace. It feels like the campus's makerspace, and I thought that that was really important. So I focused on that when I reached out to the ADs, said, please identify faculty for me. And the most, I think, feedback I got was from College of the Arts. They are really into this idea, and I'll share with you in a minute just some of the things that we're going to do with them. Also, the literature faculty was very interested. One in particular has a real interest in zines and zine making. I don't know if you guys remember those, but it's just like cheap magazines that you kind of make, DIY magazines, I guess, that you make. They were really popular back in the 90s. And he had a class where everyone was assigned to make a zine. It was the full project in the class. So we had all the material to do that. Even though the Makerspace isn't open, we did bring in his class for several sessions, and we let them build the zines in there. So they all made their zines, turned them in, and then they were put in the gallery in the library, and everyone could look at the stuff that the students had created. This is actually one of the art pieces from one of those zines that's there. So I feel like we were on the right track once we started focusing on faculty and less on what we were buying. Back to the College of the Arts, one of the people there has actually 3 different professors have an assignment where you are to create a virtual gallery, and you are to hang your own work in your virtual gallery, and people have to, walk around it. So they have, I believe, 3 Oculus headsets that they loan out to the students as they're building these things out, and would love to have more. So we're going to go ahead and purchase a couple, and it's going to work out great because we're hoping to open the Makerspace fully in fall of 2022, and we're going to have an open house, and the professors have already said that they would preload on an art show onto both of those quests so that people can come in and put it on and check out the art. So that'll be cool. Laser printer, we're going to go with a Glowforge, and that's based, once again, on feedback from CODA, College of the Arts. They really wanted that and said that they would definitely use it. Also, we're getting even more interest in zines and bookmaking, so we're doubling down on purchasing all of that equipment because, of course, that kind of equipment is the stuff that constantly needs to be replenished. So that's what we're working on right now as far as purchasing goes. So we're looking at a fall 2022 opening. Here's what we are kind of toying with now. We're looking at a reservation system, setting one up. We use the ServiceNow platform for just about everything here. It's what we use to book our study rooms. It's also what we use to book our reservations for research consultations as well as instruction sessions. So we're just going to build on that and make it so that you can check out like a sewing machine through ServiceNow. So that reservation system, we're going to try and attach some training to it for the dangerous items. The training, we're going to try out LibWizard. You can see I keep saying try out because we are really making this up as we go along. We're going to try using LibWizard because it generates a little certificate when you're done so that people will have a certificate that they can show, yes, I know how to use the laser cutter safely. Also, Mackenzie Scott, we were one of the lucky people to get some of her money here at Cal State Fullerton. A small portion of that money is being made available as mini grants to basically anybody on the campus. Even students can apply for it. So what we're going to do is apply for a grant for a podcasting studio. The reason being is that there are several classes that have podcasting as some element of some assignment. And those are usually in American Studies and Communications. Reached out to those faculty, and they were very interested in signing off on that grant. So we've got faculty buy-in on that, and it looks like it'll probably go in one of those esports rooms. The esports donor eventually came to the campus after the pandemic and said, not much. Looked at the space, didn't talk much, never a good sign. And he said he's been having trouble getting computer chips. So I'm thinking that the esports piece is probably going to fall off, and that's where I'll slide in the podcasting studio into that space. Other thing we're worried about, and this I guess is not that big of a deal because it sounds like most other people have the same issue. There's no real budget line for this. Everything has been purchased so far with one-time money. But going forward, we don't have a dedicated staff member for this area. So we're going to have to kind of cobble together some staffing for it. And we also are going to probably have to use students, I think. And beyond that, we're just going to keep on building more and more partnerships. I would like to get engineering more involved, other sciences involved. But, code has been so great, they're going to keep us busy. But I still would like to pull in other partners as well. So that's where we are, and we will see you guys, hopefully, fall 2022 with a nice open makerspace. Thank you.
But maybe you actually have some additional aspects to it. But do you have any additional challenges that you see down the road?
Just getting this thing going with all the different parts that we have in motion right now. I'm having to pull people from IT to help with the ServiceNow module, having to pull from other people to help with LibWizard. So basically getting everyone together and on the same page is probably the biggest challenge, especially when some people are working remotely and some people are in person. So lots of challenges still ahead.
Great. Well, thanks for a very nice presentation. Thank you. All of your presentations are great. You all did a fabulous job. Speaker contact information is provided here. For more information on any of the presentations, please contact the speakers, as this may lead to a collaboration or potential proposal opportunity. In addition, a link to the webcast will soon be made available on the STEMnet website. For more information, you can contact Monica Alacon or myself or Jennifer Wicks. Previous webcasts can be found there. STEMnet is always looking to collaborate and write multi-campus proposals with faculty. We've submitted almost 30 of them over the past 20 months with 15 CSU campuses, and we're happy that over half of them have been funded. So if you have an idea about a project, do not hesitate to contact me. And finally, the pandemic has brought to the forefront both the systemic disparities and inequities existing in the world, but also opportunities for us to help remedy some of these injustices. Together, they are a motivation to rethink how we live together on Earth. Let's look at a small piece of this puzzle, the university experience, and ask the basic question, what will the university of the future look like? For one, immersive learning experience will no longer be a perk, but a necessity. The intensity that comes with a physical or virtual learning environment stimulates and accelerates learning in a way that traditional learning methods sometimes cannot. The academic world is filled with rapidly advanced technology, and these learning environments facilitate student-centered learning and also pioneer research into online learning and education. Today's students are arriving on campuses increasingly comfortable using high-tech software and gadgets, requiring universities to innovate in this rapidly changing world. Second, blending traditional and non-traditional teaching methods will become the norm. A recent study estimated over 120 million people will be in higher education by 2030. As a result, universities and business schools are beginning to offer a wider range of degree programs than they did traditionally, allowing students to study at a time and pace that suits them. This is especially important when you consider how many more students are entering education while balancing family life, a career, or both. Third, student-focused learning will be essential. Rigid traditional teaching methods are no match for state-of-the-art technology and e-learning platforms as universities and business schools cater for the individual student. Gone are the days when students needed to fit within strict time schedules and inflexible academic boundaries. But what does a student-centered learning and education experience actually look like? Perhaps the biggest change we can expect to see is more schools switching the focus from the teacher to the student. Each student will be allowed to take charge of their own education by choosing their own modules and mode of learning, whether it's online or in campus. By doing this, students are active in their own learning and are able to foster the technical and transferable skills when it comes to taking the responsibility of learning in their own hands. It is both an exciting and uncertain time to be in higher education, but perhaps the uncertainty of the unknown is helping to drive the excitement. And finally, let us keep the people of Ukraine in our prayers and may democracy prevail. Have a great and safe weekend. I now turn it over to our own Jennifer Wicks for a few closing remarks.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. I want to thank all of our excellent presenters for sharing their expertise today. Incredible presentations. Just a few closing remarks, as Frank mentioned. Want to make sure that we do receive feedback from you. Of course, we welcome that. We do have a QR code on the screen over here if you'd like to snapshot that. We'll also paste it into the chat pod now. Kayla Perez behind the scenes will be pasting that in. We do have some upcoming events, of course, in April. April 8th is our next STEMnet webcast, and that's going to be on NSF Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. You can register for all of these sessions coming up using those QR codes, and they'll also be pasted in here in a moment. The Virtual Research Cafe 10.0 is Friday, March 16th as well, from 11 to 12. Further announcements, our STEMnet community listserv is available for you to join. Please do, so we can keep you up to date with all of this information in the STEMnet group. Also, we do have a private STEMnet Facebook group as well for conversations following the session and continuing. And then, of course, we did paste in the link to the STEMnet website. Feel free to join there. Visit there for the recordings, which this recording will be located actually as well on that website shortly after today. We'll make sure we do a little editing and then post it. So again, thank you very much for attending today. I want to thank all the participants for their engagement. And thank you, Frank, for running this ship so well. And we appreciate, again, all of the expertise across the system. We look forward to seeing you all on another STEMnet webcast very soon. And I want to thank Monica Alarcon and also Kayla Perez behind the scenes. Thanks so much, everyone. Be well. We'll see you soon.